Rivers do not drink their own water. Trees do not eat their own fruit. The sun does not shine on itself, and flowers do not spread their fragrance for themselves. Living for others is a rule of nature. We are all born to help each other. No matter how difficult it is, life is good when you are happy, but much better when others are happy because of you.
Good afternoon, and I'm happy that you could find time to be with us this afternoon as I bring you the latest news from across the continent of Africa. We start with the latest, and Russian President Vladimir Putin has said he gives a priority relations with African countries as he looks for international partners in the face of Western sanctions over the invasion of Ukraine. He says Russia will supply foods to needy countries of Africa free of charge if an agreement on Ukraine grain export is not renewed. He said Russia will share its technologies with African nations and continue helping them produce electricity. Russia has been expanding its influence in Africa in recent years, and Mr. Putin said he believes the continent will continue increasing its authority and role in the emerging multipolar world order. The conference is being attended by more than 40 delegates from African countries. According to Kremlin's press conference, Mr. Putin is scheduled to host African leaders in June for the Russian-Africa Summit, the second of its kind. So our African leaders are attending a conference organized by Russia there, and of course the Russian president underscoring the importance of Russia and African countries having a good working diplomatic relation. Very well. We head over to Senegal, and President has rejected claims that it will be unconstitutional for him to seek a controversial third mandate. Macky Sall's comments in an interview with the French magazine L'Express are likely to fuel an already tense political climate. The constitution in Senegal was amended in 2016 to shorten a presidential term from 7 to 5 years. It states that no one can serve more than 2 consecutive terms, which the opposition says clearly prevents Mr. Sall from running in next year's election. Critics of Mr. Sall accuse his government of using the courts to sideline the opposition politician Ousmane Sonko. Mr. Sonko is currently facing 2 court cases that could threaten his eligibility for the elections that are up in 2024. And we head over the latest from Nigeria. There has been major political upsets in some states in Nigeria as official results from Sunday governorship elections are announced by Independent National Electoral Commission. The new Nigerian People's Party, formed just months to the poll, defeated the ruling All Progressive Congress APC party to win the governor's seat in Kano, the country's largest state and economic hub of the north. A similar upset was registered in neighboring Sokoto state, where the APC candidate clinched the governorship seat, defeating the People's Democratic Party in its stronghold. Down south, incumbent governor of Lagos, Babajide Sanwo-Olu, of the APC, has been re-elected to oversee the affairs of Nigeria's economic hub for another term of 4 years. He defeated Badebo Rhodes Vivora of the Labour Party. Lagos is the home state of President-elect Bola Tinubu, who won last month's disputed presidential polls. The governorship and state assembly elections are the second and final part of Nigeria's general election, but low voter turnout, as well as incidents of violence, voter intimidation, vote buying, and ballot box snatching by armed groups, marred the polls in most parts of the country. And the latest from Sudan is that the military leaders and pro-democracy forces vowed to begin establishing a new civilian-led transitional government on April 11th, a spokesperson representing both parties said on Sunday. Speaking at a news conference broadcasted by Sudan state-run Sunna news agency, Khalid Omar said a finalized political settlement, first agreed upon last December, will be inked on the 1st of April. A new transitional constitution will be signed days later, he added. Sudan has been plunged into chaos after a military coup led by the country's top general Abdel Fattah al-Burhan removed a Western-backed government in October 2021. Pending its short-lived transition to democracy, the takeover came more than 2 years after popular uprising forced the removal of Omar al-Bashir and his Islamist government in April 2019. Pressure is mounting on Sudan's various political forces to implement the promises of December's deal. Several of the country's thorniest political issues, including security sector reform, transitional justice, remain unresolved. An 11-person committee comprised of 9 pro-democracy leaders, 1 from the army and another from the country's largest paramilitary rapid support forces, has been tasked with tying up the final agreement, Omar said. Since December, progress and consensus building have been slow. Major political players, from former rebel leaders to grassroots pro-democracy networks, remain opposed to the deal despite numerous international brokered efforts to draw them in. And a restoration of Sudan's democratic transition would likely see a new wave of cash flood the African country. Since the coup, international aid has dried up and bread and fuel shortages caused in part by the war in Ukraine have become routine, plunging Sudan's already inflation-riddled country into further turmoil. And the latest from Mali: in order to promote Mali's new draft constitution, Colonel Assimi Goïta, head of the country's junta, met with the religious leaders, politicians and civil society. And the junta say that this constitution is the starting point of the vast reform project initiated by the transitional authorities in Mali for the return of civilian power. The referendum for its adoption was previously scheduled to be held on March the 19th, but since Friday the 10th, the authorities have announced its postponement to a later date, arguing this is a delay in the distribution of new biometric identity cards and that the national electoral body wasn't fully operational. Okay, very well. Well, let's just move on to another story about some Kenyans who are seeking to sue the mother company for Facebook, that is Meta. And 43 Facebook content moderators in Kenya are suing the social media site's parent company, Meta, for unfair dismissal. The moderators say they lost their jobs in Sema, a Kenyan-based firm contracted to moderate Facebook content for organizing a union. The Reuters news agency reported they also say they were blacklisted from applying for the same roles at another outsourcing firm, Majorel, after Facebook switched contractors. In January, 260 content moderators working at Facebook's moderation hub in Nairobi were told they will be made redundant by summer. The outsourcing firm, which has run the office since 2019, said a technology rights group which is supporting the lawsuit. And Meta is yet to comment on the matter. Last month, Meta filed an appeal in Kenya challenging a ruling which said it could be sued even though it has no official presence in the East African country. And that is the latest news from across the continent of Africa. So I don't know how Meta does not understand that it can be sued here in Kenya. There is a law under the international laws. There is a law that governs this, what you refer to as multinational companies, where a headquarter is in one country, but it finds itself with other offices from 3 or many other, countries. Like in the case of a Facebook, it is a global company, of course, founded in the United States. So when it operates within the United States, it operates within the laws that, that govern that space in the United States. But when it operates outside of the jurisdiction of the United States, then there are international laws that govern, one, its operation in these different other countries, and also some of its ways of operation also must be under the laws of the different local companies that it has opened offices in. So I don't know how Facebook did not think that they could be sued here in Kenya under the international laws. Absolutely. Facebook can be sued here in Kenya. It's a whole explanation that I don't wish to get myself into, but when I find a time, some other time, I will explain to you some of the laws that govern these multinational companies in the different countries they operate in, within those countries, and also within the international laws. I'll just leave that right there. So it's very interesting. You saw me posting when I was going through this story from Mali, and after the removal of President Ibrahim Boubacar Keïta, one of the key things that this military junta said they wanted to do was to relook at the foundations of Mali. Actually, that is what they said, to relook at the foundations of Mali, and one of them was to they disbanded the constitution. This is the right word, is suspended. They suspended the constitution, and they said they will engage in a process that will allow for a proper formation of the foundation of Mali, and that the constitution was one of them. Okay, so they kept moving this goalpost. So initially, the deadline when this new constitution was supposed to be ready was on the 19th. The referendum for its adoption was supposed to be happening on the 19th. And I've been talking to you about this referendum process. And I think it formed a committee that left other opposition leaders and other religious leaders also out of it, I think, that are critical of the government. And I remember explaining here how a constitution making process is such a, it is such a process, because we've gone through it here. So I'm fully aware what that entails, and it's quite involving. And outside of it being quite involving, there should also be varied of opinions from all sorts of people, from Mali, religious leaders, students, lawyers, other professionals. And on top of that, you also need the constitutional making experts. Okay, there are people who are experts in the making of the constitution, so it is quite a tedious process. But most importantly, it requires a collective effort from people drawn, a representation from all walks of life. So that was not the case with this process. In fact, I didn't even know that the date for the referendum was this near, because I was talking to you about it, I think, in some time back in mid-February, around there, and nothing. They had just created, I think, a committee, and they were just trying to put up this and start this process, but it had not officially started in a manner that you would think that is robust, that really involves and looks like this is a constitutional making process. And so now the date was supposed to be on the 19th. Of course, today is on the 21st. That means the 19th was on Sunday. That deadline has passed. They have not come out to say exactly when perhaps the next referendum is supposed to happen. First of all, why are you going to have a referendum over a process that is not even halfway done? This constitutional making process in Mali is not even halfway done. And this is a document, a very important document that you cannot just rush over and just put in ideas there for the sake of it, or maybe it's just sections of it, because Mali had a constitution before the coup, so maybe it's not the whole constitution that you're getting rid of. It's just some particular articles, not spaces, some particular articles. We have articles in the constitution, in the Kenyan constitution. I think we have 18 chapters. So you have 18 chapters, and each chapter there are articles under that. Okay, so in Kenya we have 18 chapters, and I don't know how many chapters the Mali's constitution have, but it appears it's not the whole of that constitution that was going to be looked at, but nevertheless, it was suspended. It was suspended, and so the country is supposed to figure out how, under this military junta, they're going to come up with a new constitution that perhaps is responsive and is alive to where Mali is today, which I really doubt, because when you look at the conditions in which this constitution is being made, first of all, it is under a military rule. So what I'll assume is there's some level of intimidation and fear. So even for the people who are participating in this process, you can't participate freely because you're thinking, if I say the wrong thing, or if I oppose something that maybe the military junta wants to be in this constitution, and I, as maybe a person who is a constitutional making expert and who understands law to some good degree, come up and say, no, I don't think this will be a good idea, I'll be afraid because I don't know the next, if I step out of that area or whatever, the place that they're using to have this process done, then I might be arrested or something. So it is an atmosphere that I would not think that will be quite healthy or for a constitutional making process. I think it is quite intimidating. You're operating under the army. Who wouldn't fear that? Who will operate freely under such an environment? So I think the environment was wrong. I wish they would have had this process after having midwifed the transition back to the civilian rule, and then a civilian government could organize for this constitutional making process. But the junta, it has not created the favorable conditions for any such process to happen in a way that really we've seen other constitutional making processes happening around the world. But I could be wrong. But on the other hand, they've kept changing, they've kept pushing, and now the new excuse that, let me just read what Assimi Goita said. Let me just quote him. And he said, it is now up to you to make this work your own. Above all, you're expected to disseminate it widely and explain it to the population, he says to the crowd, adding that Malians in all parts of our country and abroad need to be informed about the developments and progress of the draft constitution. So to me that sounds, if another civilian leader was saying it, perhaps it would sound different, because that sounds like maybe a threat, maybe it's not, but it sounds like that because of the tone maybe he's using. And then he continues to say, we must work together so that the Malian people with full knowledge of the fact take ownership of the draft constitution and adopt it by a large majority. We will then have taken a decisive step in the process of rebuilding our state. And as I was explaining to you just moments ago, this is just one of the key things that this military junta felt needed to be redone so that they could really address the problems in these foundations. He said, foundations, we're looking at the foundations of Mali. So the constitution is just one part of the important process, even as they continue this journey. I don't know to where, because it appears they're not in a hurry to leave power. They're not. And so I don't know how this is supposed to work, but the referendum date has passed. It's supposed to be the 19th. They have not announced the new date, and so they're saying the new date, the delay is because of the distribution of the new biometric identity cards, and the national electoral body wasn't fully operational. Of course, it wasn't fully operational. So you have an electoral body that is not fully operational, and then you have a new technology that you want to introduce during that referendum that you've not even distributed. I don't know if you're fully acquired, and I don't know if it has been tested for you to know that it can work efficiently and you're not quoting the similar problems that Nigerians had during the presidential vote. So I don't know. I think this Malian junta is really not interested in transition. The same way Sudan's junta, military leaders, are not interested in transition. The same way Burkina Faso, military juntas, are not interested in transition. The same way the other ones in Guinea are also not interested in transition. They have tasted power. They've realized it's really good to be in this position of leadership. And so as long as I buy more time and I sit here and rule this country, then it's fine. So plans of transition, that might just need to hold off for some time now. So they're really not in a hurry. Because if he really, really wanted that constitutional process to be successful, he would have first, even organized for a presidential election. Then say anybody who wants to run for president, we want to organize for an election. Submit your names. Then people will submit their names. And then elections will take place. And then I'm assuming because it's the military junta, maybe malpractice will not happen. That is my assumption. But I could be also very wrong on that. And so maybe the elections will happen in a way that perhaps is, passes the credibility litmus test. And then after that, set up a proper government and then let that government take on the process of constitutional making. But hey, what do I know? So let's just wait and see that round and round in the circus in Mali, when it's going to end, and actually when the military junta will actually be ready to give power back to the civilian. Another place where they're being taken into circus, but this time they've given us a date. This is in Sudan. And the military leaders and pro-democracy forces vowed to begin establishing a new civilian-led transition government on April 11th, a spokesperson representing both parties have said. Because this is how they used to act, even just leading up to close to the deadline of the first 3 years of transitional period that was agreed upon, remember, just after the ousting of President Omar al-Bashir. Those 3 years, when they were nearing the end, we started seeing the fracas. So now, things are really tight in Sudan. It's really, really tight. So they've been trying to put up some public relations gymnastics. It has not worked. They held a press conference with these other countries that have experienced military coups during the AU summit after sending their representatives, and they were demanding to be reinstated back at the African Union. And I said, wow, do you not know the Constitution of the African Union, the articles in there? And the key one is that, a member cannot be led by a military head. So if that was very important for you as a country, then, you might just need to resign from your position as a military person and then just assume there is, the responsibility as a civilian, then voila, you'll be back on the African Union. And they also, those ones from West Africa also are demanding to be restated back to ECOWAS. But of course, that has not happened. So with Sudan, its economy has been battered. And the help that it was getting from the West, of course, after falling out on the second coup that took place in 2021 that removed the Prime Minister, Abdallah Hamdok, the little aid they were getting was cut off as well. And the diplomatic relations that Sudan had begun having with these Western countries also was severed at that point. And so they have been really trying to engage in these public relation exercises to see how they can appease even this deal that they say they signed in December that has now caused a lot of division in the military army itself. I was explaining to you just a few days ago that the first in command, Abdul Fattah al-Burhan, is not in a good working relations with his deputy, who seems to be very powerful, by the way. That's why he just can't wish him off, and he just can't, remove him from that position and maybe bring another person. He's very, very powerful. And so they have formed an 11-person committee, all right, comprising of 9 pro-democracy leaders. So that means the military support is just 2. And 1 from the army, all right, led by al-Burhan, and the other one from the paramilitary rapid support forces, the Janjaweed. Always remember, when I say RSF from Sudan, that is the Janjaweed. And the second in command is the one that heads this unit, all right, Hemedi. He's the one that heads this unit, And so it's interesting because you would think that if the army is represented, that all its other arms within the army, they are represented under the umbrella of the National Army. But no, the Rapid Support Forces, the paramilitary group, had to also be involved and be given a specific slot in this committee. You think about it, because the second in command, who heads this paramilitary Rapid Support Forces, had said, we want Sudan to hurry up and hand over the leadership of the country to the civilian. And they will not stand any attempt to delay any transition to the civilian. He will not stand by it. He will not support it. Matter of fact, he will fight it. So I think that must have sent some shiver within the military leadership, which is clearly divided. And maybe they realized the sooner we are able to get done with this, the better it could be for our country. But that is just me being optimistic. On the flip side, there's more to this that we're not seeing play out. All right. And the little bit of bits and pieces that we've seen, especially from the second in command and how he has come out to express himself about certain issues there in Sudan, and the delay that he's saying some sections of the army officials are delaying. And I think at this point he was clearly pointing fingers at his boss, Al-Burhan, and he said, no, we are not going to allow this to happen. We are not going to allow this to happen. So we have to allow for a transition so that we continue being at the leadership of the country, and we allow the civilian government to take over the leadership of Sudan. Just quite something. So they've given us a date, and that is they begin establishing a new civilian-led transitional government on April 11th. So that is what they said, and this information was shared on state-run Suna News Agency by the spokesperson representing both parties, and this happened on Sunday. I want to be optimistic, but remember, they added themselves another 2 years illegally outside of what was initially agreed upon when they were signing that working agreement. After the 3 years had elapsed, so they added themselves 3 years, another 2 years, the part of the deal that was signed in December. That means they should have organized for a transition by the end of next year, so that a civilian government can come into place. So I think now it's still quite early into these 2 years. And so right now they're just trying to appease the international community and to look like they are really concerned and are committed towards transition. It could be just a public relations act or an appeasement for that matter, or really it could be that they actually mean it. So, but I think talk is cheap, and since we're here, we'll be, bringing you up to date with these developments from Sudan. Maybe time will prove my skepticism wrong. I hope it does. And maybe talk is cheap. Maybe their actions would really show us truly their commitment to this transition. So I'll be waiting here to be reporting and talking about this matter and see how truly, this military junta in Sudan and that of Mali, how they are serious. But Mali, we're not even clear about their timelines now. We're not even very clear about that. And so Sudan have given us a timeline, appears as soon as possible. So let's see if at all their actions will match their words, and if at all they are serious about the transition in that country. Another country that is having a political upheaval is Senegal. I took my time sometimes back last week and talked to you about the woes of the current long-suffering opposition and also the current president, Macky Sall, and I took you back just a few years before Macky Sall and the president that was the Abdoulaye Wade, and his leadership and what that meant for that country and what Macky Sall inherited. And so Macky Sall now is saying that it will not be, if he decides to run again, I was talking to you about this last week. He's saying if he decides to run again, then he will not be violating the constitution. But the constitution of Senegal is very clear. So the reason why he wants to run again is because a referendum was held in 2016. And in that referendum, among other issues, I think there were about 15 issues that were looked at in that referendum. And one of them was to shorten the presidential term limits from 7 years to 5. So President Macky Sall is saying, since now I've been serving within 7 years, what the older constitution says, now that I'm through with this, what the older constitution says, now that we are getting into the new constitution, I might as well just relook for another mandate. And he's saying that he wants to run because the country went through a referendum. This referendum, I think the constitution of Senegal is explicit on this. This is supposed to apply from the next elections, okay? This is supposed to apply. Mr. Sall was supposed to serve his term, ends it. The way we had a referendum at that time, President Moi Kibaki was the president, but whatever was passed in 2010 could not be applied at that time because you cannot apply the law going backwards. You can only apply the law going forward, right? And so it was to start working with the new government after President Kibaki had retired. He had served his 10 years and he was gone. Okay? So that is what happened. That is what happened. And that is what is also supposed to happen after President Macky Sall has served his 2 terms and gone. But it's saying no. I oversaw a passing of a new constitution, so I was serving under the old mandate of the older constitution. Now, because we have a new constitution, I'm up. I'm legitimate. I can legally run for another 3rd term. He does not even want to call it a 3rd term. He wants to start over. For him, it's a start over again because it's now under the new constitution. And that is something that the opposition has been calling him out and has been fighting him about and has been, opposing. And because Macky Sall himself opposed when the former president, Abdoulaye Wade, tried using the same reason, because remember he ran, Abdoulaye Wade also changed the constitution in 2001. And he said, because now I went through a process of leading the country to have a referendum, so parts of the constitution was touched. So that means I am eligible to running for another illegal 3rd term. And the Constitutional Court gave him a green light. He ran, and at that time, Macky Sall, who was the opposition leader at that time, really opposed President Abdoulaye Wade from running at that time. But unfortunately, fortunately for Macky Sall, he beat the former president who was trying to have a constitutional coup and run for a 3rd term. Now, history is repeating itself again with the same person who was opposed to what the other person was doing. He wants to do the same. And now the opposition has been calling him out. And the same violence and aggression that was met upon him by the Abdoulaye Wade regime is the same thing now he's doing to Ousmane Sonko and other opposition leaders in Senegal. So, in short, what I'm trying to say in these many words is that we really never learn here in Africa. We never learn from our past mistakes. We never learn from our neighboring countries. Because I'm saying, what got President Alpha Conde, former president of Guinea, in trouble, that had him removed. The guy had served 2 terms, but he decided, since he was the best thing that has ever happened to Guinea, so he was going to force himself to run for an illegal 3rd term. And he changed the constitution in that similar fashion under the guise of COVID-19. The country had a very shambolic referendum, and so he decided to run for a 3rd term. And because of the situations and the conditions that were at that time and the intimidation, he ran. And guess what? He was removed from power. So I think that is something that he really, really regrets. And that should be a good case study for the rest of these other leaders who keep insisting on overstaying their mandate in power and just mutilating the constitution to fit their own personal greed. It is unfortunate. So I don't know why President Macky Sall would not just retire and would insist on running for another term that is not constitutional. I'm sure the Constitutional Court maybe might clear him to run the same way they cleared Abdoulaye Wade, but it's not. Sometimes you have to look at what's best for the country and how will this move work to serve or destroy the country. So those are the things you're supposed to think about as a leader, as a good leader, and then see, how is this move going to help my country move forward, or is going to bring more chaos in the country? But I guess we really, really never learn. So he's insisting, Macky Sall is insisting, and he wants to run again. And initially it was just some speculation, but he came out and said, I mean, you can't tell me that I can't run. So he rejected claims that it will be unconstitutional for him to seek a controversial third term. So that is to say, this was during an interview. So that is to say that President Macky Sall could actually be looking to run for a third term. And there's already a charged atmosphere there in Senegal that might not be very good for the country. The elections in Senegal are meant to be happening next year. So this is also another story that I've been keeping my eyes on. So I'll keep updating you on the latest, even as it continues to develop. I want to thank you so much for your time this afternoon. This has been Diaspora Dispatches. I hope to see you here again tomorrow, God willing. Thank you for watching, and bye-bye for now.